So, I was listening this morning to Lauren Mathias from Hidden True Crime as she read through the victim statements from the Delphi trial. She was given copies of the statements made by the members of Libby's family who had given their witness statements or impact statements in court. So she read through them verbatim on a live stream this morning. And I will say, if you've not had a chance to check that out, it's so worth hearing those victim statements. But one of the things that was brought up was the photos that had been supposedly accidentally released of the girls' bodies early on in the case, or well, not early on in the case, but early on after the arrest of Richard Allen. And it came out the impact that it has on the families, the lasting impact. And the point was made that it is also re-victimising the children. So that left me with a lot to think about. And then I was just browsing through Facebook because I wasn't ready to sit down and make a video after listening to all the victim statements. I was at a point where they had affected me so much emotionally that to turn around and work on a video, even for Maddie, just felt hard at the time. So I was going through Facebook like I often do, and I came across a post talking about the sheriff in Maddie's case who had released photos from the crime scene, supposedly accidentally posting them on his Instagram. He has basically come to an agreement out of court where he paid a $250 fine. And after everything that Maddie went through, to me, that just felt like a kick in the gut. That this guy, whether deliberately or intentionally, and I'm going to come back to that after I play a few clips, this guy has re-victimised Maddie, and for that he got a $250 fine. That is all. So I've got clips for you about that, and then I want to move on and talk about the impact that sharing these kind of photos have on families. And for that, I want to talk about Delphi briefly and about Ganon Stauch. So let's first of all look at the news reports from this sheriff. Before I do, I should probably mention that in terms of timeline, the photos were released in March by this sheriff, put out on his Instagram account, and these news reports are from July of this year.
Tonight, local sheriff is under fire for allegedly posting a confidential crime scene photo on Instagram. News 6 broke the story on clickorlando.com. Osceola County Sheriff Marcos Lopez is being summoned to court. Prosecutors say he posted a photo on social media that showed the body of Soto. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Matt Austin.
And I'm Lisa Bell in for Ginger Gadsden. The sheriff could be forced to pay a fine for sharing that crime scene photo. But that's not the only trouble Osceola's top cop is facing tonight. Here's what we know right now. Back in March, hours after Madeline Soto's body was found in a wooded area near St. Cloud, a photo was posted on Sheriff Marcos Lopez's Instagram page that allegedly showed the murdered teen's body. It is a violation of Florida law for government officials to disclose confidential photos that depict the killing of a juvenile. Prosecutors have cited Sheriff Lopez with a non-criminal infraction that carries a maximum $500 fine. News 6 investigator Mike DeForest has been covering this story from the beginning.
So, Mike, the state attorney is now questioning the sheriff's truthfulness and his credibility.
Matt, this is a significant new development. I just got my hands on this letter written by State Attorney Andrew Bain to Osceola County Sheriff Marcos Lopez. Now, the state attorney is demanding that the sheriff's office conduct an internal investigation into the sheriff himself for allegedly making inconsistent statements about that crime scene photo. Now, back in March, a photo was posted on Sheriff Marcos Lopez's Instagram page that allegedly showed the body of 13-year-old murder victim Madeline Soto. Now, the sheriff's office immediately issued a statement apologizing for it. The agency described the image as an investigative photo and claimed that it had been accidentally included in a social media post about a senior citizen event. But about 3 weeks later, during a radio interview with WDBO, Lopez suggested the photo was not showing the teen's body. As to the photo, there was an apology issued, but it wasn't actually the body, Lopez told the radio station. It was an area of interest where there was a body found. No one ever came out directly and said it was the victim. Well, by then, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement was investigating the origins of that crime scene photo. Investigators discovered that Lopez had apologized to Kissimmee's police chief for posting the photo of Soto's body. Later, during a sworn interview, the sheriff reportedly told investigators that he requested photos of the victim's body to be sent to his personal phone so he could compare the clothing. Now, the state attorney says he's having trouble squaring Lopez's statements. In a letter to Sheriff Lopez, State Attorney Andrew Bain wrote, "Consider this my formal request that your agency conduct an internal investigation into whether your inconsistent statements constitute a violation of Osceola County Sheriff's Office policy. Once our office receives the results of that investigation, my office will determine whether your inclusion in the Brady notification system is appropriate." Now, the Brady notification system, or so-called Brady list, is a way that prosecutors let criminal defendants know about state witnesses who may have credibility or truthfulness issues. Now, so far, Sheriff Lopez has not responded to my questions asking whether that internal investigation is underway or whether he'll be asking an outside agency like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to investigate.
So I do think it is important for us to review what was originally said. He had those photos on his personal phone. That's one of the first things that I have an issue with. There should be something in statute which prevents law enforcement officers from having any crime scene photos on their personal phones. To me, that's a major breach, and it is opening up for a major breach. And look what happened. Those photos were posted on Instagram. Now, to be sending a request to the sheriff for him to set up an internal investigation, you know that's not going to happen. There needs to be a separation of powers occurring. If something like this happens, it should be investigated by an outside agency, not be referred back to the person who actually was responsible for the breach in the first place and told, we think you should probably do an internal investigation into yourself. Right, good one. Now, it's not just about him having those photos on his phone, but it's him actually requesting those photos be sent to him by another officer. So there's a double breach there, if you ask me. Officers should not be sharing photos, not even with their bosses. And there should be something in place to protect them so that they don't feel obliged to send a photo to their boss, because that is an abuse of power. He never should have had the photo on his phone. He never should have requested for a deputy to send him the photo. But let's talk about the lies here. We're hearing that he wanted the photo of Maddie's body sent to him, and yet he claims that it was only the crime scene that he shared on Instagram. We hear that he wanted the photo to compare clothing. Well, how can you compare clothing if it's only the crime scene? They're saying there's not enough here to prosecute this guy, so that really there's no criminal charges brought forth, and instead he pays a fine. Just going to play another clip for you.
Today we are hearing from the Osceola County Sheriff about a photo of 13-year-old Madeline Soto's body he posted on social media.
He explained to West 2's Megan Mulatto how it all happened.
Osceola County Sheriff Marco Lopez is speaking out after accidentally posting a photo of 13-year-old Madeline Soto's body on social media in March. Though the sheriff's office was not the lead agency in the investigation into her disappearance, he says it was his team that found what they thought could have been her body.
The major on the scene was actually the person who sent me the photograph. And it's our protocol, I'm the sheriff. You know, we do this.
He says the photo was also entered into evidence. The next day, he says it was accidentally included in a post about seniors on his Instagram page.
Accidentally, when I posted the senior photo array, that was the last picture in the photo array. And it was brought to my attention like 10 minutes later, and I immediately took it down. And I immediately notified legal.
This led to an investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which found there wasn't enough evidence to show the photo was posted on purpose, resulting in the state attorney filing a non-criminal citation of up to $500 for violating public records laws, which the sheriff says he plans on paying. Sheriff Lopez says after FDLE finished their investigation, his office received a letter from the state attorney confirming that criminal charges wouldn't be filed. But on the back of that letter, there's also a request for an internal investigation. It says it's a formal request for an investigation into whether the sheriff's, quote, inconsistent statements violate the sheriff's office's standards of conduct policy, referring to statements he made to FDLE, the Kissimmee police chief, and on a radio show.
And I think a conversation between myself and the current state attorney could have cleared a lot of this up, because it's subject to interpretation. There was never a lie. There is no lie.
The sheriff's office says they're working on a response. In Osceola County, Megan Mulatto, West 2 News.
The guy is claiming there was never a lie, and yet there were multiple stories given with regards to what occurred, and multiple versions of what was posted. But here's a big thing for me. When you post images on Instagram, it gets you to check your images first, right? Even before you press post, you're reviewing your images. He didn't review those images. He didn't see that that fifth image was completely different from the others. I don't buy that. And when you post images on Instagram, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I like to double check my post after I've made it. I look at my post before I close out and go off and do my business. I would imagine that most people do that. So supposedly, this post sat up there for 10 minutes. He was oblivious to the fact that he had just put these photos on there and didn't know until someone notified him. To me, it sounds very convenient. Very, very convenient. But here's the thing. When it's only a small fine for something like that and there's almost no repercussions, what's going to stop people from doing it? Clearly, this guy's had no repercussions. He hasn't faced any internal repercussions with his job. No suspension or anything. Just a fine. Just a piddly widdly fine. And how much does a sheriff earn? He probably earns more than enough to not even notice that $250. So here's where I'm having issues. He should not have had those photos on his own private phone in the first place. We have issues these days with social media, posting photos and sharing photos of victims. The laws need to change. The laws were not written at a time when this could happen. The laws need to reflect the simplicity of being able to simply post a photo quite easily anywhere on the internet. It's not like the old days when photos were just on paper and you had to, share them around. It is too easy to lose control of who can see these photos. And that photo is out there forever. Sure, you can claim that, well, it was taken down after 10 minutes, and if it was a seniors thing, maybe nobody copied that photo. I don't buy that. Even if nobody copied that photo while it was still there before it was taken down, there are people who have the capacity to go into archival things and find things that are no longer there. I'm sure there were plenty of hackers who, the moment they heard what went on, probably went straight in and pulled that photo from the archives. Once something's on the internet, it stays on the internet. You can't get rid of it. So, what was it? A $250 fine. That is all this guy got. This is the news that came out this week. So I'll just show you the article for that. So I've gone with Reader View because I get so annoyed when I look for articles and there's more ads on the page than anything else. Just makes it really distracting. So I've just gone with Reader View, which is why it looks so plain. I'm only going to read the first paragraph because the rest is just a recap of what I've just gone through. So, Osceola County Sheriff Marco Lopez entered a plea agreement recently with the state attorney's office, agreeing to pay a $250 fine for publishing a photo of a missing girl on social media. Well, that's only half the story, of course, because we know that the photo was of Maddie's remains. The photo was posted from the crime scene. He should never have had that photo on his personal device, and he should be facing far greater consequences. Until laws are changed and someone is made an example of, then this sort of thing is going to continue over and over again. And there's going to be more and more victims whose photos from crime scenes, from autopsies, are going to be out there on the internet when it doesn't need to occur. So I'm going to now play an excerpt from Lauren's live stream from this morning, or it'd be afternoon if you were in the United States. And this is her reading a portion of Becky Paddy's victim statement, her victim impact statement, specifically talking about the impact of having those photos of the girls out there on the internet.
The impact of Richard Allen's choices made that day has haunted our families for almost 8 years and continues even now. Because of choices he made and subsequent arrest, he was appointed 2 lawyers to defend him. Those lawyers have done nothing but twist the knife around and around in our wounds Richard caused that day. Because of one lawyer's sloppiness, sealed crime scene photos of Libby's naked and mutilated body were left unattended, allowing images to be taken and spread around to people on the internet. As recent as this week, those crime scene photos were still being shared on the internet and for no good reason or entertainment by many. Sharing those photos changes nothing. It doesn't solve the crime. It doesn't bring the girls back. So now, because of Richard Allen's choices that day and his lawyer sloppiness, the impact has now become generational for us. One day, when Libby's nieces or nephews decide they want to learn more about their Aunt Libby, they may be faced with those horrible crime scene photos that were so carelessly taken care of. I wonder if his lawyer would have been so careless with those photos if they were photos of one of his children. Would he still have felt no accountability because he was snookered?
And that's what it comes down to, sheer carelessness. These sorts of images should be protected so closely. They should not be accessible to anyone other than those who do actually need immediate access. They should not be on someone's personal device. And the thing that really hit home here for me was the generational comment. Now, when it comes to Maddie, we know that Jen Soto probably doesn't give 2 hoots. But what about other family members? If you saw the interview, or if you listened to the interview with Maddie's grandfather, Juan, you could tell he was broken by the loss of his granddaughter. And what about all Maddie's school friends and Maddie's cousins? At some point in time, they're going to want to look into this case more. It's just part of dealing with the grief, trying to understand the situation. They may come back to it as adults when they have a greater understanding of what truly happened. And what if they do a search and come across those images that this sheriff so irresponsibly released? It shouldn't be good enough to say, oh, it was accidental. There should be huge penalties for this sort of thing, because you are victimising the families once again. Becky referred to twisting the knife in their gut. Just the effect of all the additional things that were going on to do with the Delphi case. And, you know, there were people who did care for Maddie. And if these photos resurface, that's going to be the same for them, twisting the knife in their gut. I can't imagine how it would feel to be on the internet and you're just trying to find a way to understand something in your life that is just so hard to understand already, and to suddenly be confronted with photos like that. And for that, someone gets a $250 fine. No other consequences, just a $250 fine. And where does it stop? I want to remind you of another case. This is going back another 12 months. And that's the Ganon Stauch case. In July of 2023, a YouTuber decided to put Ganon's autopsy photos on her Patreon page in a video and charged people $3 to see it. That YouTuber at the time had roughly 90,000 subscribers. It didn't impact on her channel. I checked. She now has 120,000 subscribers. She's gained another 30,000 subscribers in the time since that occurred. She never faced any penalties, and yet she made a profit from posting those photos on her Patreon. What were the consequences for her? Absolutely none. And I'm going to play a few clips about that too, because I think there were some other quite valid points that were brought up in these clips. Things that need to be taken into consideration when these breaches occur.
I think the thing that bothers me the most is as a society, we should be protecting children. Children are vulnerable. Children are innocent. That's what Ganon stands for. That is why we're all heartbroken over what happened to Ganon. And so to re-victimize this child who represents that innocence that was taken away from him, this little boy that doesn't have a voice, that never had a voice, we are responsible to now be that voice for him, and so I think that's the thing that traumatizes me the most about this, is just that all of us, all of the creators, and I believe that there are more creators that shared these pictures. We should be thinking about protecting children in life and in death. We protect children. We protect their vulnerability. We protect their bodies. We protect who they are. And it's up to us to do that.
Okay, so it was actually sheer coincidence that I ended up with a clip with Lauren again. But it is such an important point there. It's our roles as adults to be protecting children, to protect their innocence. And yet, people can get away with doing these things. There were no consequences for Zav Girl. Maybe she lost a few subscribers, but she gained more subscribers. She still gained whatever profits she made from putting that video on Patreon. Her channel is still up. She still makes a fortune off her channel. There were never any legal consequences, and I'll touch on that briefly as well too, as to why these kids are such easy targets. Because, yeah, you can say, well, why doesn't the family take legal action? But you can only draw so much water from a well before it dries up. How much pain can you inflict on a family and still expect them to be able to function, to be able to do day-to-day things? That's the big issue here. We're not just needing to protect the victims, but the victims' families. If there are minimal consequences for something like this, we're failing at that. $250 was all this sheriff was fined for posting images, or one image, I believe, of the crime scene showing Maddie's body. There were no other repercussions. What happens if down the track another creator comes across these photos and decides to share them on their Patreon and make money out of it? Well, then you're re-victimising the families and you're re-victimising the victim. I'm going to play a clip from Ganon's father where he talks about the impact on him of those photos being out there on the internet. Just to show you why it shouldn't be put onto the families to have to deal with these sorts of things.
It is re-traumatizing. It's hard to, we just finished the trial just over 2 months ago, Brian, and now we're having to kind of relive some of this stuff and not being able to put it behind us.
Yeah, and I think for me, like what really pushed it over the edge was charging the money. I mean, obviously posting it alone would be disgusting, but then charging money to see those photos, it's really, really just awful.
The word I use to describe it is evil, Brian. In my opinion, it's just evil. Like the world got enough information from the trial to have every discussion they want to have. Why do we need to go have a freedom of information request and pay for this kind of information and then dishonor my son by putting these photos out there like that? I mean, the world got to see it. I don't know how well you followed it, but the only day I chose not to come to the trial was the day that they showed the autopsy photos. Now I feel like I can't even go on YouTube without the possibility of accidentally coming across these photos.
Yeah, and I when we talked to the prosecutor last night, I mean, they made a special effort to make sure that those photos were not released on the live stream. In other trials that I've covered, they always do that. I mean, they just want the jurors to see them because that's part of obviously the legal process, but it's not the kind of thing that the public needs to see at all. Do you think you may take legal action? Is there anything that you can do to get these off the internet to sort of like protect your son?
We've talked through some of those options. The hard part, Brian, is I am just emotionally and psychologically and financially maxed out from the last 3+ years of this process. To take legal action, I just don't know if I have that in me. But what I'm trying to do with you tonight, and I appreciate you having us on, is to help shape the narrative. And I don't really think I have to do much. Based on the messages you've received and the feedback I've seen from other responses, I don't think it's going to take much from us to have these people, repointed in the right direction.
Yeah, I think people just lose sight of the fact that these are real families dealing with this. I mean, there's a true crime community, and 99% of them have good intentions and are really focused on the victims. I'm sure you felt that through all of this, but there's just those bad apples out there that are trying to make money.
Essentially, what Al was saying there is that he didn't have any more fight in him. Not just physically, but financially. He didn't have any fight left to deal with those individuals who were sharing images of his child on the internet. So where does it end? Because it's not going to end. While a person can get away with paying a $250 fine, that is all, for accidentally posting a crime scene photo on social media. There's no incentive for people to try and be more cautious. While it is still allowable for a sheriff to have crime scene photos on his private phone, then this sort of thing is not going to be stopped. While YouTubers can post images in videos on Patreon and make money from it and have zero consequences, this is never going to stop. It's time that laws are looked at and are brought up to date so that there is acknowledgement of the possibility of images being leaked onto the internet, of images ending up somewhere on the dark web. And the penalties for such things need to be so huge that you're not even going to want to accidentally post a photo or accidentally include autopsy photos in a FOIA release, because the penalty's just going to be so huge that you are going to actually take care and be responsible for your own actions. Maddie's innocence was already lost. Maddie's dignity was already lost. What was the cost of her dignity being further impacted? $250. Maddie was worth so much more than that. Maddie deserves so much more than that. And it just breaks my heart when I hear that this sheriff essentially got away with it scot-free. Why was there no investigation? No proper investigation? Why is he still sheriff? There needs to be changes, and they need to happen sooner rather than later, before more victims are further victimised this way. So, I know this has been a slightly heavier video, but I really felt it was a timely one to make. So if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. I know it's not a great topic to be hitting like for, but hit like for Maddie. Hit like because you feel that I've covered the topic well, if that is the case. YouTube likes it when those things happen, and it means that this video will get seen by more people. And maybe by getting seen by more people, we can raise awareness for issues like this, and maybe eventually changes will occur that will protect these children from being re-victimised. So please also leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Is $250 inadequate? Do you think it is adequate? Do you believe that it was purely accidental that he posted that photo? Or do you believe that there was intent there? We know there was so much hatred towards Stephen Stearns by detectives, sheriffs, deputies. Could this have been his response to what happened? So leave your comment below, let me know your thoughts. And thanks for listening. I'll catch you in the next one.